Someone told me that it was by bar mitzvah, and the bar mitzvah boy at the end of the speech, so he says, and I would like to thank my mother for all of the, he's struggling with the paper. I'd like to thank my mother for all of the unbelievable mesiras nefesh that she had for me all of the years, all of the tremendous care that she took for me he goes, I can't read my mother's handwriting. We are part of the inyanim of Shabbos Shira is kind of to be real. That it's real. Shira is the highest level of nevuah. I was once in a shul somewhere in the country, like an old sign, and I guess it was there from Simchas Torah, and the sign said like this. I guess it was describing Simchas Torah at night, and it said that after Mariv, the crowd is going to, it said whatever, Mincha is going to be this o'clock, they're going to sell the Aliyahs, Mariv is going to be at 9, and at 9:30 there's going to be a breakout of spontaneous dancing due to the Simcha. Yes, obviously it was they already knew what's going to be spontaneous, what's going to happen on its own. Did the Yidden make up beforehand, before they went into the Yam Suf, did they make up that they're going to say Shira? Probably not. It was just something that came out. And Shira, in its real sense, Shkayach, which is the high level of Nevuah, means that it's not a prepared script. It's just you reach a certain level of Akaras HaTayv, of just being thankful that you're alive, that you burst forth in Shira. The Kedushas Levi explains, if you take a look in the Sefer Torah, and you look at the Shira in the Sefer Torah, so you will notice, move it away, it's very hot, move it down a little. You will notice that it's not the normal lines of the Torah. It's a riach al gabe levein. It's like bricks. 1, 2 bricks, 1, 2 bricks. It's broken up. The words are broken up. And the Kedushas Levi says a very interesting reason why. He says that the Torah is the blueprint of the world. Istakel bi'araisa ibara alma. Shem stared into the Torah and created the world. Now, if you want to change Ma'aseh Bereishis by having the Yam Suf split, you can't just do that offhand. If you want to change Ma'aseh Bereishis, you can't just decide you're looking at a huge skyscraper, I'm going to change the 4th floor. You don't know what's leaning on what's connected to what. You have to go back to the blueprint and you have to redo it. And so when the Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted to change Teva, change nature by splitting the sea, the Rebbe has to go back to the blueprint of the world, which is the Torah, and reorganize things so that it could support such a change. And that's why the words are like shaken up, because they're like being moved from one place to the other. L'cha'ira, it says clearly, by Yoshev Hayam Leisane, the Gemara dashins, Tanai Hisna Kadosh Baruch Hu Ma'aseh Bereishis. That right from the beginning, Hashem made a condition when the Rebbeinu Shalom put nature into place. The Rebbeinu Shalom said, I want to tell you right now that here is a rider, there are going to be exclusions. There are going to be some nisim, there are going to be some miracles. So wait a second, so why do we have to change the blueprint for? There was a rider, l'chatchila, that there's going to be an exclusion, that there's going to be an exception to the rule. And the answer is, it's not a done deal. Although, as we have discussed many times, when we come down to, as we have discussed many times, but it only happens once, that before we come down to this world, there is an angel, there's a malach that gives us a tour, and the malach showed you where you're going to be born, the malach showed you your parents under the chuppah, which you either were or were not very excited about. The Malach showed you where you're going to grow up. The Malach showed you who you're going to marry. The Malach showed you what life is going to be, all the way up at Zivula Basra. The only thing the Malach doesn't show you are things that are within the context of your range of Bechira. However, nothing is etched in stone. Through Mesiras Nefesh, when you have an assignment, you have a test, and you rise above that test, things change, and they change dramatically. I want to share with you a story that a young man told me this week, this last Shabbos, that happened to him. This individual had a very big company. A big company. And like many big companies that produce the kinds of, something in the furniture or something. And like many big companies that do so, you got to get out. You got to market your product to all the wholesalers and the builders and whatnot. So Vegas is the big night. You go to the show in Las Vegas and you put up the show and you pay a lot of money to get a good spot and a good position and a good press. And if you impress the right people in those hotels during the right time of the year, so you have parnasa for the year. Done deal. And Mitaka was a done deal in terms of preparing. He already paid in all the money and he hired all the people and it was all set and the advertisements were there and he's ready to go. And by chance, he's speaking to his Rosh Yeshiva the night before and his Rosh Yeshiva tells him, "You're going where?" He said, "Vegas." Las Vegas? Where in Las Vegas? At the Chabad house? Oh, there are shuls. I'll go to the Chabad house, but I can't really make the show in the Chabad house because, it's like in the hotels. Hotels like Las Vegas hotels. Right. Like casinos. Well, I don't know, it's never there, but it's like one complex, more or less. Near Las Vegas, there's a big desert, right? Yeah. Maybe you can make the show in the desert. It's much more tzniistic over there, I think. No, it's not going to work. It has to be in the hotel. So the Rosh Yeshiva told him, "No, you're not allowed to go." I'm not saying this is a psak for everyone. I'm just saying what the Rosh Yeshiva told him. He said, "Is the Rosh Yeshiva telling me I can't go?" I think that's the definition of no. So he started again, but you see his whole business, but no. So he said, "Rosh Yeshiva, can you give me a bracha that I'm going to make up the money for not going to Las Vegas?" And Rosh Yeshiva said, "No. If I'm Rosh Yeshiva, I don't give brachas. I just tell you what I think it's also a piyalach. If you're not letting me go, you can do what you want. So I'm not going to stand. You ask me, I'm giving you my answer. I'm giving you my feeling." So in an ultimate act of bravery and courage, I wasn't tested. I don't know if I would pass this test. He told his partner he's not going. We've got to pull out. We'll take the hit on the deposits that we gave. And his partner hit the roof. His partner got really angry, wanted to call back to Rosh Yeshiva, said it's getting sekonos and fashos over here. But no, didn't really do that. But his partner said, "You're out of your mind. And who's the Rosh Yeshiva to tell you whether you can go or not?" He says, "He's my Rosh Yeshiva," and everyone could decide who their Rosh Yeshiva is. And Lamaisa, he made a decision, and he knew that he said this decision may cost him the business. And he said that he is not going. Let the chips fall where they may be. Well, not in Vegas, not in the casino. But he's not going. Anyway, he pulls out, and he gets a call from a major, the day afterwards, he gets a call from a major news network and says that we're doing something on the economy and people remodeling their homes and so on in cheap ways. Can we do, as part of our documentary, a close-up on your business? This was a, across the country, not just a local, national television station, a major network. And he's like, "Well, if you insist." And they come down with the whole crew and they did a real thorough thing. And obviously, the publicity that he got from that far outdid whatever could have happened in Vegas. So he was speaking to the woman that was in charge of production or documentaries for this major news network. And he said to her, "Where did you find my company? You looked it up and, you heard it in here in a Kol Mavasser, where in the Hamadiyah, where'd you get to my company?" She tells him, "I'm Jewish. I may not be Orthodox, but I'm Jewish. But there's one thing my mother told me. Did you ever hear of the word bashert?" "Yeah? So what was bashert? How did you get to my company?" She says she's driving on some highway in Nevada. I don't know what it's called. And there's a big billboard with your business advertised. She pulls off the exit a little bit too early. And as a result, instead of getting on to the next highway the interchange where she was supposed to, she winds up coming around, passing the billboard a second time. And she proceeds to make the same mistake again. Now, if that happened to me, I would say that's perfectly normal, but it was happening to her. Apparently, she doesn't do this very well. She says, 3 times I passed your bill. And then I turn on the radio, and he explained to me that he had one ad on the radio preparing for this, and when he realized he wasn't going, he pulled the ad. So they told him, but the one ad is too late to pull, you're going to have to pay for it, it's going to air. And it wasn't even during a normal time period. It was late at night, and she said, 3 times, God took me past this billboard, and pinked, I opened the radio, though I don't know if she used the word pinked, but Just when I opened the radio, I heard your ad, and then all of a sudden my producer calls me and says that they're looking to do a close-up on a company. Can you think of a company? She says, I think, God thought of a company, and I called. He said that from this story and on, he got very, very into Shmiras Anayim and realized what this means. And it says, Taka, that it's Mesugel for Parnasa. Yosef HaTzadik, who controlled all the money in the world and provided for all of the money in the world through his Mesiras Nefesh of Shmiras Abris, of Shmiras Anayim. So he got very into it and helping people in many different ways. There's part 2 of the story. He said that when he started going to China, based on what his Rosh Hashiva told him, he would tell the people down there that he's not going into his room until they take out the television and the computer. They said, it's screwed into the wall and it's very complicated. And with the way it works, he explained to me, when you go to China, there's a representative of the factory that you deal with that speaks English or quasi-English and deals with these people. And he says, well, I'm not going into the room until you screw it out. He says, whatever it costs money, the labor, whatever it costs, I'll pay for it. So he paid for it. And they physically took out the television before he slept there at night. Then he found out that another major, international company came in and found this factory in China that he was producing in. And obviously they could outbid him. And if he lost that factory, it would be very, very difficult for him to happen. And when he heard they were in negotiations, he said, yeah. And then the next day, the guy from the factory picks him up and he says, let's go, let's make the final arrangements. So he says, honestly, that big major chain was talking to you. He says, yeah, but we decided we're not working with them. So I said, why? What do I have to offer? I don't know if loyalty is exactly the way it works there, whoever survival of the biggest buck. He said, what do I have to offer? So he said that I happen to tell the manager of the factory or the president or whoever it is about you taking out the television. He said, he sounds like a holy person I don't want to start up with. We're keeping his contract. So twice, Shmiras Anayim came through to him. So I told him, what your Nisayan is? Your Nisayan is what the Chovos HaLevavos says. The Chovos HaLevavos says that the lowest level of bitachon is if someone has no parnas and he has nothing. He says, God, bitachon, please, Hashem, I have so much bitachon in you. That's a madrega. But it's the lowest level of madrega because he doesn't have much of an option. When a guy has a big business and the cash is rolling out over there and he says, Rabbi Shalom, I know it's all you, that's a higher level. He says, you got to believe, that had you gone to Vegas, you would have not gotten this thing. You got to believe that this was the connection over here. And I got to tell you that when I first started doing Daf Yomi tapes, which goes back some odd, maybe 27, 28 years ago, and I want you to understand what was going on there. There were no cell phones yet. There were no 5-cent phone cards. There were no internet lines. Right? You had to make a long distance call. It was like $3, $4, $5 a minute. I don't know if you remember. You have a long distance call. Oh, he went running a long distance call. Like every second it was beating. I remember those things. I was telling my Anikel about this. He asked me, Zaidi, was there a Brooklyn Bridge when you were little? A little insulted by that one. I said, was there a Brooklyn Bridge? He says, the backup from the FDR Drive onto the Brooklyn Bridge, the 20 minutes, even that was then over there. He says, was there a Brooklyn Bridge? Of course there was a Brooklyn Bridge in my days. It was around, alive and well. There was a Rosh Hashiva in Torah V'das. After the war, he was very out of it. And when I wasn't there around, but when they came and they told him, there was a whole tumult in the Beis Medrash when the news came about the terrible tragedy that President Kennedy was shot. And there was such a ruckus in the Beis Medrash. He jumped up. What's happening? They told him that the president was shot. He said, "Was? Roosevelt is gestorben?" He said, he's totally in his own. Anyway, so the FDR Drive was around and the Brooklyn Bridge was around. Say why anyone would name a president after a highway that's under perpetual construction, I don't know, but Al this stuff was still around. But when you got a long distance call, it was very expensive, $5 a minute, $6 a minute. I remember speaking to an uncle next to Charlotte. It was like, hello, how, goodbye, boom, he was scared every second. So this fellow calls me at 3 a.m. What do they say? What's worse than getting a wrong number at 3 a.m. is getting a right number at 3 a.m. Of course, And he's like, hello, he says, Rabbi Schachter, yeah, he goes, today's daf, yeah, spoke out of Pnei Yeshua on the Tosfos. Is that like, a I wanted to really know what the Pnei Yeshua means. And I'm like, yeah. I said, it's 3 o'clock. He goes, I see. Apparently Taipei is 12 hours off from here. So he said, he looked up on whatever, I don't know what kind of gadget you had in those days. But he said that, it's the same time, 3 o'clock. So he figured he could call. He forgot it was 3 a.m. over here. So anyway, as good as you are with a Pnei Yeshua on a Tosfos at 3 a.m. in the morning, I tried to answer him. And the next night he called a little earlier, somewhat earlier, and he's going on and on. And finally I once asked him, I don't mean to, and in those days, there were no iPods. He used to go to Rabbi Applebaum, who was Meister Nefesh himself, started the Torah tapes, and he would schlep suitcases of these tapes. Of these, for the young generation, there used to be something called a cassette tape. Okay? You find it in your grandmother's garage next to film, alright? And it had like a thing, and you put it in a tape recorder, and you press the button. Okay, anyway. So he used to schlep these things, figure out which dafim he was up to. And I said to him, how much is this call costing you? Because we were on the phone a considerable time. He said that the calls 28 years ago, the 3 days stay in the hotel, this discussion about the Pnei Yeshua and the Tosfos, it cost him about $400 or $500. So I said to him, I'm very impressed. I'm duly impressed. You're willing to spend $500 to figure out a Pnei Yeshua. But maybe if you come back, you go to Lakewood and hire a tutor, you'll do much better. And why are you doing this? So he said to me something which I'll never forget. He said, Rabbi, I'm sent by my company over here. And I am in a hotel. All alone. He said, in this particular section of town, I am the only from person probably in a 50-mile radius. Do you know what kind of nisyanis I have? Do you know what is going on downstairs in the ballroom and the showrooms? And he says, without getting too elaborating over here, he says, I feel that if I don't open this Gemara and this Tosfos and talk to a live person and tell you I'm getting back to you tomorrow night to try to figure it out, that my Yetzer Hara is going to get the best of me and my neshama is gone forever. He says, I'll spend 500 and another 500. And apparently he wasn't on a Rebbe salary, but still, it left a tremendous... Now that's Mesiras Nefesh. And when there is Mesiras Nefesh, what does the Rabbi Shalom do? He takes the blueprint of your life and reorganizes it. It changes. Mazel changes. The Gemara Masechta Shabbos is a whole thing. If you're born on Mazel Madim, right? So what happens? You're either a moil or you're a Schachter, you have to spill blood, and all sorts of things. If you're born on Tuesday, if you're born on Wednesday, if you're born on Thursday, if you're born on this Mazel, there's a whole machlokes of Yesh Mazel Yisrael, Ein Mazel Yisrael. Meister in the Iri says, Tefillah could change everything. And there's that one moment of Mesiras Nefesh. Because Baruch Hu rewrites things. Now, Parasha Beshalach, if you take a look at the Parasha, and you're thinking what you're saying, you can go dizzy. The whole Parasha is a yo-yo. It goes up and it goes down. My father used to share every year. I remember as a little kid, he used to say, who's Klal Yisrael? Are they tzaddikim? Or the other way around? The Parsha starts, the Yidden have a tremendous Mesiras Nefesh, Lech Tech Acharech B'Midbar B'Yeretz Leizerua, they're off to the Midbar. 600,000 men, women, and children, million people into the sand dunes, Midbar, nothing there, no Wi-Fi, no nothing. How are you going to survive? Only a munah in the Rabbi Shalom. Wow, what Mesiras Nefesh. Right afterwards, they turn to Moshe. Pari's coming after them, and they go, tell me, Moshe, Hanibli en Kvarim b'Mitzrayim, there's not enough cemeteries in Mitzrayim, you're going to send us out over here? They're a little sarcastic over there, They went to Shalom Bayis Shiurim, you don't talk to your wife that way. Why were they talking to Moshe Rabbeinu that way? These are the same people. And right away it says, that Parai Hikriv, and they turned around, and they went back toward Parai. Parai, imagine, right? The Iranian army is marching toward you with all the nuclear weapons, and we're running for our lives. Moshe says, turn around and march toward them. 300, we turn around, and we head back toward them. Ein lanu ela divrei ben Amram. Amazing tzaddikim. And right afterwards, Halala Oivdei Avodah Zarah. I don't know. Why can we save them? The Malachim Taina, they're both Oivdei Avodah Zarah. Then, right afterwards, Nachshon and Aminadav goes diving into the Yamsuf. So the Vart we say every single year, it says, Kashas Ivuga Shaladim Kekriyas Yamsuf, that the marriage of a person is compared to, it's so difficult to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to find your Shidduch, as it is Kriyas Yamsuf. So the Lel of the Rebbe said, you go into the Nachshon and Aminadav jumped into the Yamsuf, the water's up to his stomach, water's up to his chin, the water's up to his nose. He says, I can't do any more. Gets to his nose, the water splits. They see in your life, you got to keep trying. The water gets to your nose, that's when the Rebbeinu Shalom splits it. You got to keep going. And don't ask what's going to happen when the water gets to my nose. Just keep going. The only thing is, said the level of the Rebbe, depends where your nose is. A guy that thinks the world is mine and I'm great, and your nose is up high, takes much longer for the water to get there. A guy that walks with his nose down and says, my life is in your hands, and who would want me? The water gets there a lot quicker and splits a lot quicker. Which is why Zivuga Shaladam is Kakriyas Yamse. For those people that their nose is not too high, the water gets there a lot quicker. The square Rebbe's going to the Toysa says in Schachter Zerich, and if you look at the picture, we learned it not long ago in Daf Yomi, a couple of days ago, that the Jews actually, unlike the coloring book, which has them go in one side and come out the other side, that the Yidden actually went into Kriyas Yamsuf, they made a semicircle, and came out the same side that they went in. So he says, when it comes to Shidduchim, what do you think about this Shidduch? Me? That? Then he goes into the world of Shidduchim, and he comes back to the Schachter, is that thing still available, You got to make the semicircle to come back to where you started with. All right, be it as it may be, tremendous amount of the Mesiras Nefesh, Nachshon ben Aminadav goes running in, and the water splits for them. And during Kriyas Yamsuf, there's such amazing things. They pick fruit off the things, and Rasa Shifcha Layam Ashleira Yecheskel Ben Buzi, and there's such madregas. It's unbelievable. It's beyond imagination. And what happens right afterwards? They come off and they start screaming about the water. You took us out to die. You just had Nevuah. Greater than Yecheskel. What are you talking about? You think God took you out to die? Then they start eating the mun, and the mun is so amazing. What is going on over here? The ups and the downs. Are these the same people or they're not the same people? They start eating the mun, manhu. What's such manhu? The Chayzer says, you have this guy, used to walk in late for Shachris, walk in, pop a can of soda, walk in and davening, out of davening, and by Aleinu, Kiddush Club, all of a sudden he eats the mun, and he's running in, Baruch Sheyamah! And they go, manhu, who's he? That's what happened. People ate the mun, they didn't recognize him. Who is this people? Katzker Rebbe said, Leinit the mun, Leinit the Torah, Aloich lehaman. You didn't have money in the bank. You didn't have what the Chayvus, we all need, we need a safety net, we need insurance, we need the Chayvus Lavavis calls it a mashkin, we need collateral from God. That's it, you're in a midbar, there's no place to buy food, and that's it, we have 1 day's supply. That's it, except for Erev Shabbos. That's the madrega that they were on, that's what the mun was all about. Different world. Rav Schwab, famous story, was by the Chofetz Chaim, and the Chofetz Chaim asked him a shaila. He said, what did the mun taste like? Rabbi Sai, whatever you thought of it was, right? Whatever you thought of it tastes like. You can imagine the mother was going around saying to a kid, I can tell you're thinking about ice cream. Stop that. You start thinking about asparagus right now, right? Okay? So the mun tasted like what you wanted. So Schwab said he was a bacher, I think. He ate by the Chofetz Chaim. And the Chofetz Chaim asked him, so what happens if a person didn't think of any food? What did it taste like? So the Chofetz Chaim said, then it tasted like nothing. The taka didn't have a taste. If you didn't appreciate what you have, the taka didn't have a taste. So this is clearly sold by the mun, in the middle of all of this unbelievable madrega, nisim, galuyim, das and aviram come with their shtick back and forth. And then they get out of das and aviram, and then we have a molek, and then nasav and ishma. Someone is suffering from a very serious case of schizophrenia over here. What is going on? Are these people tzaddikim or lack of such? One day he's on the honor roll, the next day, he's at risk. What's going on? Mamish, happy courses. What's going on? Okay, it was the Erev Rav, it was them, it was not them. So Rabbi said, I remember my father was sharing with me this beer. I think he said it in the Sefer Mar V'Shamish. This is our lives. And this parsha is called Shabbos Shira because this is our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the ongoing Nisyaynis. Somebody once said, he walked into a room, he saw a Danish on the table that was not his. He looked to the right, he looked to the left, and he helped himself to the Danish and he ate it. The guy comes back, he says, you're from Yid, what'd you do? Why'd you eat my Danish? He said, L'Shem Shemayim. He said, why? He said, you just gave a shiur, and you told me that there's certain things where there's certain isurim that the isur continues to happen again and again and again, and there's a one-time isur. What does that have to do with anything? He said, it just occurred to me. I'm looking at your Danish, and if I'm over loisachmoid, every second I'm over loisachmoid again and again. But if I eat it, I'm just over loisachmoid once, and that's it. He said, a much better situation over here. The nisyonis of our life is an ongoing loisachmoid. There's a Sarisa de La'ela and a Sarisa de L'Sat. And I want to explain this a little bit. I don't know why this is a funny sight. But if you've ever seen an overweight father huffing and puffing and running along with his kid on a two-wheel bike, training him, and the kid is like, I'm riding the bike, and his father's holding on. And the father lets go, and the kid, right, you know the famous story, he goes, look, no hands, right? And then he goes, look, no feet, right? And then crash, and he goes, look, no teeth, right? So now, that the kid he's holding on to the kid, and he's riding along. The kid feels like, I can ride. And the father lets go, because if he doesn't let go, the kid will never learn how to ride himself. And he wobbles and crashes into a garbage can, bruises his knee, gets up, and starts again. The Rabbi Shalom is teaching us how to get close to him. And by doing so, there are times in our life where the Rabbi Shalom holds on to us. There are times in our life that are Nasav and Ishma. There are times in our life that are just Kriyas Yamsef. And then the Rabbi Shalom lets go. And he says, and now you're on your own. And this is why I created you. And during those moments that Hashem lets go, there's a tremendous vacuum. Okay, Uncle? Right?
Okay.
There's a tremendous vacuum. And there's a tremendous sense of pain. And we question, God, where are you? Do I believe in God? What am I doing? And people have questions. Why am I putting on tefillin? Why yes, why not? Do I believe or don't I believe? How could God let that happen to me? And you figure your relationship with the Rabbi Shalom is over. Chas v'shalom, just the opposite. This is the growth process. The process is we get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Rabbi Shalom lets go, not because the Rabbi Shalom is dumping us, because the Rabbi Shalom says, I want to see that you go, come up closer. The guy walks into a flower shop, and he says, I want to buy flowers for my wife. What do you recommend? And the flower man says, well, what did you do to your wife? What are you apologizing for? And I could recommend what level of flowers. The Kedushas Levi, once, again I heard this from my father, he promised something to someone which he wasn't allowed to do. Whatever the Shemaim, they told him, don't promise that person a Yeshua, he doesn't deserve it. And he did it anyway. And because of that, for a year, he lost all of his Ruach HaKodesh, all of his Madregas. And we opened up a Siddur, he davened like you and I daven. Asher Yoshe Veisacha Oid. And the Kedushas Levi says it was the most precious davening his whole life. Because at one point, this is what tests our loyalty to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when he got back his Madregas, he got it back 10,000 times more. 10,000 times more. You know, see, it's going on now. There was a study done in Eretz Yisrael today, a couple of days ago. Very respectful study. And it came out that 80% of the population of Eretz Yisrael believed, as Rabbi Shalom, 60% of fast on Yom Kippur. It never was this high. Light Chanukah, burn chametz. And it's boggling the mind of all the politicians, the people that are working on this and trying to strategy for the next election, because they thought this whole Haredi bashing and everything would bring this all down, and it's perplexing, because the levels went up. Because the nature of a Yid is, that's what he did. A chutzpah, those from people. What, me? No, I'm not an Apikoris. What do you think, I'm an Apikoris? What happened, when we're challenged and there's a break, we come back closer. That's what happens. And the truth is that that's true for every single relationship. I had this past Shabbos, wonderful opportunity. I was by the Rebbe Shabbos, Rabbi Pazanski. It was a beautiful Shabbos. I got to meet someone firsthand, a wonderful, wonderful human being that's doing so much for Klal Yisrael you can't imagine. His name is Rabbi Tzien Klatzko. He has this thing called Shabbos.com, where he puts together people all over the country that should have where to stay for Shabbos, and he himself has like 90, 100 people there for Shabbos. And he said over this story, that he said at one point he was into pictures. He collected pictures or paintings. And there was a story in Europe, a famous story. It was like when you went to Haskalah story. Someone wrote a whole novel about it. I think I'm getting the pratim right. I forgot the guy's name. But it was a shoemaker who sat in Warsaw someplace, or Krakow, one of those places. And he had a 12-year-old son that did paintings, and people were nudging him, like, when are my shoes going to be ready? So he put the paintings up. Hey, look at the painting. Don't nudge me. So this guy walks in, and he says to him, who drew those paintings? He says, my 12-year-old son. He says, can I have your 12-year-old son? Can I take him? This is potential is amazing. And he was never naive. He didn't know the man was the head of the maskilim. And he took away his son, and his son dropped his whole Yiddishkeit and became this famous artist, and so on and so on. As the story goes on, to make a long story short, he had a painting by this painter, this 12-year-old boy, turned into a famous artist, and later an avid socialist and communist that's going to save the world, and so on. And he gets a call from his son, meaning the son of this famous painter, already died. He said, I'm so-and-so, and I heard you have one of the paintings of my father. He says, yes. And he begins to talk to him, the famous story that your father was taken away from your grandfather. And he says, but I'm doing a thing on my father, a book, and I would like to see the painting. So he said, come over to my house. He tells him where he lives in Muncie. And the man comes over with his wife, and he says, why don't you come into the house? He says, it's Hoshana Rabbah, day before Hoshana Rabbah. He says, no, we're just going to look at the painting. He says, before I show you the painting, where you're driving from, sit down, have the Suda with us. We're having a Suda. He has like loads of people by a Suda. And he says, I want to just get out of here. And his wife says, well, I'm hungry. We're here. Then he says, why don't you spend the night over here? And he says, really want to get out of here. We have reservations by Howard Johnson. He says, why would you spend money on a hotel? We have rooms for you over here. His wife says, I am tired. And he schleps him in there to Simchas Torah. One thing to the other. And once you get the wife, you get the husband also. And the whole Simchas Torah, he's watching what's going on in this. He's just amazed at what he sees. And all the way at the end, Matzah Shabbos, he says, listen, you're going to keep me here forever, right? Enough is enough. You're showing me the painting, you're not showing me the painting. And he shows him the painting. The painting that he had was a shtetl Simchas Torah, what it was like Simchas Torah in the shul. And the guy's like gulps hard. And he says, what should I tell you? He says, I was raised my whole life thinking the shtetl life is over, and now I see that it's for real. Now that I see that it's here. There are so many lost neshamas that have no shaychus to Yiddishkeit. There are lost neshamas that have shaychus to Yiddishkeit. There are from people, there are bachrim and kids in yeshiva, they don't know what it means. The word betachon, the word amunah, the word Rabbeinu Shalom. They don't know. Somehow it's getting lost. Because we're frustrated in our Nisyanis, and we have to teach people that the Nisyanis are also part of the Rabbeinu Shalom. He told me a story that a famous reporter from some newspaper, found about the Shabbos.com. He came across, he asked if I can come over and see him. He said, he convinced him to stay there for Shabbos, and he got an aliyah. He came up there, he's getting an aliyah, he's telling him the words. He says, what's your Jewish name? He says, I don't have a Jewish name. He says, who's your favorite Jewish character? He says, Maimonides. Would you want my Jewish name to be Maimonides? He says, no, Moshe will call you Moshe. He says, I never had a bar mitzvah. He says, we'll make you a bar mitzvah now. They took candies, threw it into the air. He said, the man wrote and was writing now, and he showed me some of the articles that he's writing through this. He says, why didn't anyone teach me this before? Why didn't anyone teach me this exists? Okay, so now, the Maral had a minig, Shabbos Shira in the afternoon. That's what he did. Took all the kids out into the Alt Nai Shul, which, by the way, some people think it means Alt Nai, old new. It means the Alt Nai Shul. They built it on the Tanai that it has to be taken apart. Funny, that's the one of the surviving shuls in all of Czechoslovakia. I guess when you know l'chatchila, nothing is for sure, that's a school for bracha that it stays. In any event, so the Maral used to take everyone out, and they had an interesting minhag. The Rebbeim would tell the children the stories of Kriyas Yamsuf, particularly how little kids plucked peiros off the watery trees and threw it up to the birds. That's the Dover B'Itoy brings the whole makar for this Maral. And then they would give out kasha to all the kids, and all the kids would throw it up in the air for the birds. Because they were like the kids by Kriyas Yamsuf. And then they would all line up, the parents with the children, and the Maral would give them a bracha. And he brings very strong makairos for this story. Okay, like they say, I remember once in yeshiva there was this guy screaming about the goylem. It never happened. The Maral's goylem, it's not true. And he was screaming at I don't want to say the name is the guy that answered him, because now he's a pretty chashuv guy, but he had a little sharp tongue, and he's saying, the whole story with the goylem is not true. He says, I have living evidence. There never was such a thing as a goylem. He says, I have living evidence that there is such a thing as a goylem, he says. What do you mean? He says, I don't want to tell you. All right. So what's shot in this minhag of the Maral? Let's try to understand. So we know, every child knows, what are you going to be doing this Shabbos? If you remember, you're going to be putting out food for the birds, right? Why do we do so? Because Das and Navirim went, and they put out the man, and then the birds came and they ate it, so we're saying, thank you, birds. The Arpnei Moshe says, it's just, we want to, this is the Shabbos of Parnasa, of the man, and just like you see all the birds, where do they get Parnasa from, right? Birds migrate across the world. They have packed bags, they have credit cards, they have food accounts in restaurants, they just fly across the world. They know they're going to have food wherever they go. So we want to bring that inyan of Amunah to us as well. The Ruach Chaim says the reason we feed the birds is to be Ma'ori Rachman. You have Merachim in the Kadosh Baruch Hu's Briyos, they have Rachmanas on you. It brings to Reb Chaim Falagi, if someone has someone sick at home, Badik and Menusa, you should feed the birds. I don't know if he says particularly Shabbos Shir, it's Ma'ori Rachman, the birds are Mespal for you, I don't know what that means. There's the famous Magen Avram. The Magen Avram says, stop, don't do it. Halacha, you're not allowed to feed an animal on Shabbos unless it's mezainas and alecha, unless you're the one that is responsible for the mezainas. Okay, it says, some agree with the Magen Avraham, some argue with the Magen Avraham. The Taisa Shabbos says, no, you can do it, because the reason we feed the birds on Shabbos is it's tzarich odam. It's not for the sake of the birds, it's our sake. We feel good about it. The Levush says during the winter you're allowed to, because otherwise the birds don't have food, so you are allowed to. And the Chazanish used to do it Matzah Shabbos, his birds had Malav Malka, whatever the case was. Now, I want to add a shtickle here, 2 cents over here, even though I don't belong anywhere within light years of this list. Birds migrate across the world, right? Birds have this built-in GPS. And they have these amazing stories how birds will fly halfway across the globe and they come back exactly to the place, and that's without road marks or without signs or without big things that tell you Avenue K and King's Highway, right? They just come right back. They're born with GPSs in their head and no one really knows 100% why. Apparently, there was once a beautiful article I read that they hold it's the stars. They look at the stars, they know where it's going, and they try to prove it. They released a bunch of birds in the auditorium, and in the planetarium, and they mixed up the stars, and the birds started crashing into each other, so they navigate through the stars. And they did an experiment. They took a bird from when it was hatched, or prior to its being hatched, and they never connected it to its mother, and they never it never saw any stars. And they let it go, and it flew and knew exactly where to fly. So it had all the stars in its brain. Who programmed it into its brain? If evolution means things evolved, and its mother didn't teach it, how did it know? It was the same when the Rabbi Shalom made the birds, the Rabbi Shalom made it with the whole bria the way it was. Okay. Now, we also migrate. We migrate. It says there are membes Messiahs, just like the Yidden went through membes Messiahs from when they left Mitzrayim till they came into Eretz Yisrael. In your life, there are membes Messiahs. So once in a Mordechai Gebot from David Feinstein, so Zayn Gesund and Stark, he said some people in Parashas Masai rarely comes out alone. When it does come out alone, there's a whole machlokes, whether you read till Sheni or you read till the end of the membes Messiahs. Says Rav Moshe's minig was during the week he read only till Sheni. And because it's Biful Malacha, people have to go to work. On Shabbos, doesn't make a difference anyway, so he read till the membes Messiahs, till he made the first stop. So Reb David Libavel Mechaim L'chaim said a beautiful pshat in his father's minig. He said, we think things are happening at random in our life. Oh no, now what? Oh, I don't believe it. God, where are you? What is going on in me? He says, we think it's just, and then at the end, when we get to Shabbos, and you have a time to think a little bit, you say, no, all the dots were connected. We are migrating. Why are we different than the birds? How are we migrating different than the birds? The birds have a set path. They have known nice. They know exactly what to do, where to go. The birds fly in that triangle. They fly exactly. There's a leader that signals to everyone else. There's no machloikas of kabbalah. They don't break off and make their own chasidus, make their own yeshiva, make their own beis medrash. Groups break off. I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. They fly in groups. They don't have nisyanis. They don't have nisyanis, lashon hara, rechilas, and all the things we go through, and covet, and a lack of money. Parnasa, you go down, you eat whatever's there, and you pick yourself up, and you get weiter. You know exactly where you're going from the day you're hatched, pardon the expression, until the bird leaves this world. They know exactly where they are. I think I'm going to say it quickly, because I think I just said the story, but I know my wife once called me, as many of you already heard, and she told me that out of the steam in the house, I said, what, a leak? No, she says she sees the beak of a bird. I said, I'm having a rough day. I said, please, get some sleep. No, come home, you'll see. And I came home and I said, what? There's no beak of a bird. Just sit here for a while. I'll sit here for a while. And I'm sitting and I'm telling her she really needs to get some sleep. And as I'm sitting, I hear this ruffling of feathers and I'm going, uh-oh. And I turn around and sure enough, there's a beak of a bird sticking out from underneath my steam. And I'm like, why me? But then again, I wouldn't have stories of these things would happen to me. So I pull out the bottom of the steam and this bird, I don't know about yay big, comes marching out and gives me this look like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, excuse me? And he's marching around the house, and he finds like this, I don't know, some Cheerios on the floor or something, he's pecking away, and we open up the front door, and kindly, there's the world, and he looks like, and this may be my imagination totally, but it looked to me like he looked up and said, wow, a world, a sky. And he flew up, and it looked like he was flying drunk a little bit. And he was trying, like you saw, he was trying to get into a school of another birds, and he was like a little learning disabled or something. But after a while, again, maybe in my imagination, he caught onto it right away, and he's flying in that triangle, and he's off. So I asked later an exterminator, I don't know who to ask. I said, what, makara? He says it could be. He showed me on my air conditioner there were some birds perched, and an egg fell in, and must have fallen down, and the insulation kept it warm and protected, and it incubated and grew and hatched. And this bird has been living who knows how long in your walls. I said, well, what else is in my walls? I said, what was the bird living on? He said, on whatever worms or whatever insects are found in your walls. I said, Shkoyach, thank you. Okay. But this bird, the second it was out there, he knew exactly where he belongs and where he's going. I know I've said this story also many times, just do it quickly, but it's the Parasha of birds. I used to take care of davening in a camp in the mountains. And Tisha B'Av was a very hard day for camps. And it was a hot day. It was unbelievable. And we start saying kinnis, and this bird goes flying in. He's flying around and around and around. And the kids are jumping all over the place. And I'm like, I say, get to your seats. And finally I came up, I had to do some quick thinking. So I told the kids that, this is a neshama, I think, of a bird that didn't cry over the churban. And the bird was doing its part perfectly. It landed at one of the, on things. They said it's waiting for us to say kinnis, where it's tikkun. What are you doing running around? And all the kids, they went for it, and they all started saying tikkun mamish with and they were like kinnis, and I was saying bird, give it up. And finally, we finished the piece. They all stopped to look what's happening next, and I'm like, I don't know. And the bird picks itself up and made a beeline for the ceiling fan. And it went right into the fan. And let me tell you, it could have not been more dramatic. It was a Hollywood flunk of feathers all over the place. And everyone was like in shock. And I got my voice back and I said, and now that the neshama had its tikkun, you better daven. And everyone was, that was such a machai. They were davening so... Anyway, the next time this happened, and mamish didn't happen until like 10 years later. I was in the camp, and it was Nachseder, and again a bird flew in. So then they're running around the place. I told them the story of the first bird. I said, this bird didn't daven Marav. And your Marav is going to fix it. And they davened Marav, and they were screaming, and right after Marav, and mamish, the same thing happened. You would think I would have turned off the fans, right? But the first bird went into the fan, and there was like a flunk of feathers all over. This was different. This went through, and it was like a Schachter. Boom. The head flew one way, and the body of the bird flopped down on the table, right, in front of a bunch of very startled kids, right next to someone's tefillin. And I said, it's probably someone that talked in his tefillin, because maybe spoke Lashon Hara in his tefillin, because tzipar, the Mitzayra brings the tzipar, and I had a whole Torah right there. And we have to learn for its tikkun, and I'm sitting, and this thing is next to me, this headless bird, okay? And I'm sitting here, and we're learning, and they're learning so geschmack, and all of a sudden I see this horrified face of the kids. They're like, what? And I turn around, and I catch in my peripheral vision, I kid you not, this headless bird was like fluttering up in the air. I want to tell you something. The Apis emptied out so quickly. They're jumping out the windows. And I want to tell you, if I wasn't frozen to place, I also would have ran. I found out later that, I heard it from a Schachter, he said that it could happen, that even a headless bird flickers up a little bit. I said, now, thanks for telling me now, okay? All right, but getting back to the thing. The birds know where they're going. Now, I think one of the reasons we feed the birds Shabbos Shira, whether you do it on Erev Shabbos, during Shabbos, Matzah Shabbos, whatever your Rav tells you to do, is because the birds are saying, we know there's a mahalach in our life. In your life is Parasha Beshalach. At times you have a munah, you get married, the world's ahead of me, I'm going to be so beautiful, so wonderful. And there are times you're angry and you're screaming and you're cursing, you're saying things you can't believe you're saying and thinking things you can't believe you think. And we're saying this is part of the process. The Rabbi Shalom says, work yourself out of it and pick yourself up. You're going to go weiter. It is part of the process. There's a peladik rush. Dustin Aviram, right? Why did they survive Mitzrayim? 4/5 of people died. Why did they survive? And the Kadosh Baruch Hu split the Yamsuf just for them. You know why they survived? Says the Rosh, they may have been Rishoyim, they may have been Bali Lashon Hara, but Lamaisa they had a munah. They knew that the Rebbeinu Shalom was going to take the Jews out of Mitzrayim. And for that koyach of Amunah, they survived, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu split the Yamsuf for them again. This is the Parasha of Amunah. It's coming up to Chamishasa B'Shvat. The Bnei Yissaschar says Chamishasa B'Shvat is Abraham Yom Kodim Yitziras Avlad, where Machrizim Bas Ploini L'Ploini, where they call out who marries who. It's the Shidduch of the world. Shidduchim, you want to know, what's the guy doing now? The Chayvus Levavah says that B'tachin should be prorated according to the age of a person. The older you are, the more B'tachin you have to have. Because the more you would have seen in your life how you can do anything in the world and there's no guarantee for success. You can do everything wrong and there is a guarantee. You can think you're safe and you're not safe. The most big, powerful ship in the world, right, crashes into a thing that's not supposed to happen these days. That reminds us, every once in a while, the Rebbeinu Shalom reminds us we are in His hands. The older you get, there has to be more betachin. Each year, Shabbos Shira, we have to believe Rabbi Shalom. I know my life there's a course in my life. The only difference between me and the bird is that by me, it's because I'm a human being and I'm a Baal B'chira, there's ups and downs. And my downs mean that in my worst Nesai, when I want to look at something, when I want to get involved in something I shouldn't, and I run away from it, the Rabbi Hashem says, great, I can now rewrite the contract. I can make you a different kind of a person. I want to conclude, there's a story, the Weitzner Rav wrote a sefer Mekatshe Hashem. He wrote some bulls and Sionis he had during the war. Toward the end of the war, he's in some camp, they're on the death marches. And the Allied armies have already freed them. Okay? But there was still Allied bombing from on top, and there was some confusion. And occasionally there were sad stories of friendly fire, and where, especially in those days, they weren't so sophisticated, the radar systems, and the Allied bombs inadvertently bombed even innocent people. And he writes a story in the Sefer. He writes this story. He says that, the Weitzner says, I was sitting with my son, and throughout the war, they risked their lives for each other on the train, and they were dying for each other and helping each other. And they're sitting on this board in one of the marches. And the son leans on his father. He's like, I can't anymore. And his father's like, I can't. Don't lean on me. I can't. And the son leans on his father. Father, I said, don't lean on me. And he's so hurt. He's so insulted. He gets up and walks away. It's the first time it happened during the war. These was a father and son that gave their lives for each other. And he says, now you're going to be insulted after all this time. And they get up. And he says, you want to be insulted? Be insulted. He couldn't believe they were acting this way. And his son walked off one way from the bench, and he walked off the other way from the bench. And at that moment, a bomb came, zhup, and the bench blew up. He said later, he saw then, you see the hashgacha? Even in our anger, even in our lowest moments in our relationships, that's also part of the hashgacha. When you're makir that even the mistakes that we make in our relationships is part of the hashgacha, it's an opportunity for growth. Then you see the Yeshua, you see the Simcha, you see the Nachas. So someone told me this Shabbos the story that his grandmother, when the Weitzner Rav was nifter, so his son heard that his grandmother has a picture of them in the concentration camp. And he comes and he heard that he had a picture from his Vart. And so she took out her album and she noticed another picture. And in this picture, he is standing with his father and they're standing next to an American soldier. And they're pointing to a bench that's in pieces. And he says, where did you get this picture? She doesn't know how she got the picture, somehow from this. Where did you get this picture? That's the bench! I don't believe it. And finally someone in the room said, I know where she got the picture. That soldier was my great uncle. And he had it taken and he gave it to her and it wound up over there. He said, you see, my father's nifter, and he's like, there's like a 1 in a million thing. He's showing me, remember, in your pain and in your tzaras, that's also HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's part of the migration. And if we understand that in the voids of life, in the scary parts of life, in the uncertainties of life, it's uncertain for me whether the Rabbi Hashem knows where I'm going. What I have to do is to hold on to Him. Then you will see how quickly the Rabbi Hashem will rewrite the contract, rewrite the blueprint, and it'll truly be Shabbos Shir.